Well, welcome everybody. My name's Nigel, and I'm the European President of God Squad. And it's a pleasure to be able to share this with you again. So this reflection comes from Matthew 13, and it's related to the pearl of great price and hidden treasure that Jesus gives us, parables. But before we do that, we need to find a context, and we're going to be reflecting on those two parables um, in our beautiful Devon countryside and by the sea, because many of us come from different countries and perhaps have never seen the beauty of England and the English coast. So we're going to do that in a moment. But first, I think it's important to put context to those two parables that Jesus says. And in God Squad, we believe it. One of our statements of faith is that we believe in the Old and New Testament in its entirety. So we accept that. And so it's important also to take the difficult passages along with those which are easier to hold. And Jesus, directly before these two parables that we're looking at today, he gives an explanation of another parable. And earlier on, he tells the parable to the wider crowd, and he talks about a farmer who sows seed, who sows wheat, and the wheat grows, and an enemy comes along and sows weeds among the wheat. And rather than pulling up the weeds and damaging the wheat, they're both allowed to grow together until harvest comes and the wheat is collected and put safely into the barns, and the weeds are, it says, thrown into the fire. Well, the explanation of this parable comes directly before the pearl of great price, and basically Jesus describes it, and he says, well, the field is the world, and the one who sows the seed is the Son of Man, or Jesus, and the wheat is the people of the kingdom, whereas the weeds are the people of the evil one, it says. So there's this distinction with the two. The enemy sows them is the devil, it says, and the harvest is the end of the age, where he sends his angels out to harvest. And as the weeds are pulled up and burnt in the fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send out his angels, and they'll weed out of his kingdom everything that causes sin and all who do evil. They'll be thrown into blazing furnace, where they'll be weeping, etc. But the righteous will shine like the sun, and this is the good news, in the kingdom of their Father. Whoever has ears, let them hear. And this is really important because it puts the other passage into context. It shows why it's the kingdom of heaven is so valuable, why it's so important to seek it, and why it's so important to be part of Jesus' kingdom. And the good news also is that nobody is excluded. So like a jigsaw puzzle where we have a couple of pieces like the pearl and the treasure, we need the bigger picture, we need the bigger context. I think this gives it. So if you'll come along with me now, as if by magic, we'll appear on the cliffs of Devon. Well, we're down now in Hartland in Devon, and this is where I've been stopping and taking some relaxation, but it's a beautiful part of the world. And while I'm looking round at the coves and the fields, it's reminding me that this is actually a place where wreckers were prominent in centuries gone by, and it's famous for the wreckers who would wreck ships and plunder their goods and plunder the treasures and stash them in caves and hide them for later on. And so this is where we are in this part of Devon where this would actually happen. And I'm actually standing right by the sea, and I'm going to go down the sea in a minute, and I apologise for the sound quality on that part, but I'm going to go down, and I thought it'd just be a good place to film this reflection today. So looking round, we're in this beautiful countryside, and in this field really, and further on there I've got my wife down the bottom taking the dog for a walk. But it's really relevant to what Jesus was saying, and I think this is what Jesus would do. He'd walk around and he'd look for examples of how he could describe something which was in some respects indescribable, but he wanted to say something about it. And in this occasion he wanted to say something about the kingdom of heaven. And so he uses this analogy of the treasure, and he uses the analogy of a man finding buried treasure in a field, and he finds it and digs it up, and he realizes its immense worth, so he buries it again, and then he buys the whole field so that he can then come back for the treasure. He gives everything he has. He would have spent all he had for this treasure that was buried here. And I think what Jesus is using this analogy, and he's using the analogy of the fact that that the kingdom of heaven is so valuable. To be part of the kingdom of heaven, to be part of Jesus' rule, to be part of this, it's worth giving everything for. And I think that's what Jesus was talking about, and it's quite relevant here. So we're going to go down to the sea in a minute, and again I apologise for the sound quality, but I think it'd be a good place just to do this on this occasion. Well, we've made it down onto the to the sea, and again it's a beautiful environment. And again this reminds me of Jesus firstly walking through the fields and thinking about how he can describe the kingdom of heaven. But now as we're standing here, you can imagine him standing on the banks of the Sea of Galilee and thinking, what can he use to describe the value of the kingdom of heaven, to reinforce this? And so he's looking at the sea, I'm sure, and remembering perhaps times when he's been out with Peter, James and John, the fishermen, and catching various fish, and maybe they've picked up a shell, an oyster shell, and opened it, and inside maybe found a pearl. And Jesus is using this analogy of a pearl, but it's not just any ordinary pearl, it's a pearl of great cost. And so Jesus describes this merchant who finds this pearl of great price, this pearl of great cost, unimaginable value. And so the merchant then sells everything he has, gives everything he's got, and buys this pearl of great price. And this is really what Jesus is saying. The kingdom of heaven, it's not the shape, it's not anything else except for the value of the pearl, to describe the value of the kingdom of heaven. And it's even more pertinent when we think about the contextual passages that we've looked at, just to put this in context, which really explain why the kingdom of heaven is so important, why being under Jesus' righteous rule, as a fair ruler, as a righteous ruler, as a loving God. And it's so important, and nobody's excluded from this kingdom, but there are conditions. And so standing on this at the sea, it's such a joy to be here. It's so relaxing, and you can imagine Jesus doing the same as he was describing.